We're working through some bugs here, but we'll try to get you back on. So at least we can see Strick's pretty face as we're talking as you hear us back and forth. Not a pretty game for Nebraska, though, unfortunately. 68 loss to Northwestern. Yet another road loss, yet another blowout in the first half. They did what they could to try to come back, but a lot of that was Northwestern seemingly playing not to lose there at the end. So the score, unfortunately, probably a little bit closer than what it actually was. Difficult loss for Nebraska. Again, another one on the road, another loss that puts them back under 500 in conference play. We're hoping not to get back to that point in this season, but here we are. So let's get to your initial thoughts. Strick, we'll start with you. Once again, another loss on the road. What happened tonight for Nebraska? What went wrong?
Oh, well, I mean, there's quite a bit that's went wrong, actually. You can just tell by the energy that they gave off early on. They weren't locking into their men. They weren't coming and following off the screens. They were getting hit on screens and not getting through them or over them. They weren't trailing, and they were doing a lot of just wave switching. That's when you know. I mean, it could be fatigue. I mean, you have back-to-back double, overtime games. I don't personally know if that's an effect, plus travel, maybe some practice. You just something maybe you're not ready for yet. And so for me, it has to do a lot of that. When you go on the road, there's one thing you got to do, fellas, is you got to match energy. You can't allow the team that's there, plus that team is a half a game behind you. You already have tiebreaker against them. Right now, if things ended the way that it would end or could end, you're looking at this team having, Minnesota having a double bye out of the whole group. So they figured, look, we're going to come give all the effort. You can tell that they were wanting revenge. And the reason is they were looking at, if you remember, they finally caught it at the end of probably towards the tail end of the second half. They caught it when Tamanaga had them out in Lincoln. When he hit the big three, he did this with his head. And you saw Ty Berry do it, Boo Booey, and those guys were doing it early. So you could tell they had some fodder. They wanted some revenge, and they came out and they gave a valiant effort and showed it throughout the game. Now, listen, let's be honest with it. Nebraska had a chance in this game. They did. They had every opportunity, and again, for me, and I'm gonna continue to say this, Bryce Williams kills me with these one-handed passes and at critical times in the game. It's not it happened in the previous game. It happened in this game. When you throw one-hand passes, you can never pull it back. It's gone. Once you commit, it's gone. And in crucial times, you got to put two hands on that ball. If you see a guy jump, pause. Now you got him. And you see, I think, who was it that got the steal? I want to say it's Langborg got the steal. Langborg. He ended up with the steal and the dunk. And they were making a nice run at that point. And it just, every time they started to get back into it, something happened to where a dumb turnover or something of the sort. And they just, the lead would continue to go back up to anywhere from 16 to 18.
To that point, Stricky, you mentioned the crucial moments for those passes. Like, everyone on Nebraska had turnovers, right? 17 turnovers from 7 different guys. Williams and Mast had 3 each. Every starter had at least 2, and then both Lawrence and Wilcher off the bench had 2. But a crucial moment isn't just a 3-possession game trying to cut it to 2 or a 2-possession game trying to cut it to 1. It's, can you get 15 to 12? Can you get 12 to 10? Can you get back to single digits? Nebraska got back to single digits at 9 at the very end of the game. But I wonder if 1 or 2 of those passes, if they're made with 2 hands, gives Nebraska that little bit of a spark to get it to single digits sooner and put some of that game pressure on Northwestern with, 7 or 8 minutes to go instead of with 3 or 4 minutes to go.
Yeah, and there's no doubt about it. But here's the thing about what you just said, Austin. You saw the energy that they were giving towards the end of the game. Why only at the end of the game? Why put yourself in situations to where you have to come back? You have to expend extra energy. You have to have everything to go right. Expend that energy earlier in the game. For example, you had multiple instances where Juwan Gary had layups and missed them. You could tell that this was not going in the right direction when they had a fast break opportunity. I can't remember who missed the layup. The layup was missed, but there was two Northwestern players there waiting for the follow-up, and there were no Nebraska guys there until after the follow-up goes in. That's when you know that your energy level's not there to win a game like this. And then once we get into the stats, you're going to see it even more. You just when you go on the road, it's got to be all of those things. It's got to be matched energy. It's got to be, you've got to win the 50-50 balls. You're going to get situations to where you're not going to get some of those calls. So you have to match energy. You have to win those 50-50 situations. You have to deflect, defend, and not put your defense in a precarious situation. And they did that because they were so far off of screens. When they came off the screens, they were so far off that there were open passing lanes everywhere, which then they were taking advantage. Now, Ty Berry goes out. You're hoping you could take advantage, but Martinelli comes in and you let him get into a nice rhythm. And then all of a sudden you've got 4 or 5 of their guys in double figures, even though they're playing high quality minutes.
So Boo Buie 17 points in the first half, Martinelli 15 in the second half. Strick, the other disappointing thing about the turnovers is it's the same thing Northwestern did in the game in Lincoln, right? They jumped some of those passing lanes. They read their scouting reports, knew Nebraska would get lazy with the ball. And I don't put that on Fred Hoiberg or the coaching staff. I mean, maybe they can hold them more accountable with discipline somehow, but at some point, if you're a player, that's on you. Learn the lesson. You've got to get tired of turning the ball over like that. And I'll throw this out there too. You don't want to apologize for the comeback win over Wisconsin, but you almost wonder if this team felt like, hey, we did this once, Wisconsin's better than Northwestern. We can get away with it again. I don't know if that's what it was, but it's kind of the way it felt.
Yeah.
It isn't as good on the road. You're not going to have that crowd support. So to try to leave it up to a second half comeback is a really dangerous game to play.
That's what I was saying. In essence, that's what I'm saying. And here's the thing, man. Let's just be honest about this. I don't care who you are. You can't have 48 attempts at a basket at the basket
in 40 minutes.
Shoot better than the team that you're playing against as far as percentage wise. Not necessarily from 3, but from 2. You don't even shoot as many threes as they do. Again, win the free throw battle. And look, I get into these differentials, and you guys listening, or you guys even with me, be like, oh, these differentials different. But I tell you, and even the announcer said that Fred Hoiberg felt if they can win the turnovers, the differential, and minimize those. And also, I think he said, I want to say rebounds. Yeah, rebounds and turnovers. If they win those, one of them, it's a close game. 2 of them, the announcer said, if they win 2 of them, they believe they win the game. Guess what? They lost both. And what happened? They lost the game. And I say this all the time. And some of you guys may be thinking I'm crazy when I be talking. You just think I be just running my mouth. But that's it, you can just go back and track it. Every time I've spoken about this is the recipe. And as you said, Austin, it comes down to the fact of this: when are you going to learn your lesson? Simple as that.
And it's interesting too, because Nebraska's, we've seen this in the past where past teams, it was, there became stats that you look at, and many times it's kind of been that 3-point shooting. This team shoots well enough that it doesn't have to be. But this year it is, like you said, the differentials, it's the same categories these last couple of games. It's turnovers and rebounds. And so it seems like, you're starting to kind of feel Nebraska's tape is catching up to them. They're pretty well scouted at this point, and that's somewhat of their Achilles heel. Nebraska tonight, and again, a lot of this it's nice enough to talk about cutting it to single digits there toward the end. But this game, in my mind, was lost in the first half, and those differentials we showed out. Northwestern offensive rebounds 8-1 compared to Nebraska. Part of that's because Nebraska had to go to that zone to try some way to guard Boo Booey a little bit better, because one-on-one that wasn't working. But that's so you'll give up a little bit of that in offensive rebounds when you go in zone. The other one, it was points off turnovers, 14-0 at half.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and so it's just you continue here. Now we should ask you this, and Strick, I want to think about the new starting lineup for Nebraska. They put Gary in. You take Jamarcus Lawrence off the one. Bryce Williams then kind of running the one tonight, and he had a pretty good game. Maybe not in attack, like you said. There's certain parts of his games that you'll always be there to complain about. But what did you think about the new look starting lineup for Nebraska? Fred maybe didn't think too much of it because he went with a different one to start the second half.
Yeah, listen, I'm going to just stay here. Josiah Alec right now for me, he's one of the ones that I might be looking elsewhere. I'm looking at it probably, and I know that he's hurt now. That I think that's where Eli Rice is hurt. If I'm correct, I hate that, because if I'm him, I'm probably going Gary for Matt. If I'm going to switch a starting lineup, okay, that's fine. Go with Bryce. And it looked better. Jamarcus looked a lot better tonight coming the way that he is. And I could understand that, because CJ Wilcher's been able to be a great beneficiary of just letting things happen, see what's going on, and then come into the game and do your thing and be aggressive. So that's fine. Now, I'm looking at Gary at the 4. I'm looking at Mast at the 5. I'm looking at then, if Eli was available, I would have put in. I want to be solid across the board. I know that I can rely possibly on Gary and Eli to get boards for me if I need them. Rank wasn't ranked tonight for some reason. I don't know if he's tired, and I can understand that. He's been banging a lot, bumping and grinding with a lot of big men and big, strong guys on the inside. Alec is just, I don't know, man. I mean, when I saw him dribble into 3 guys, I did the Airplane, and you guys may know what I'm talking about. The Airplane movie where everybody in there goes, they slept, the whole crowd slept. Yeah, I did that, and I felt like it was a ripple effect of everything in my house every time I see him start to dribble. But yeah, they need him, or I'm trying to figure out a way to get Jop up to speed, because for me, how if all we're asking you to do is just be active, a lot of high energy, attack, and get your butt in there and board, that you don't get any rebounds in 15 minutes. I 2 turnovers and no rebounds and nothing else for you. That just blows my mind. Now, I'm not mad at the young fella. I'm just stating a point.
The numbers speak for themselves. The eye test speaks for itself. I just want to think a little generally here. I was a big fan of the move when Nebraska moved Josiah Alec to the bench. He had that ankle injury that he was out for a game. The first game that Nebraska started the lineup of Lawrence, Tominaga, Williams, Gary, and Mast was against Michigan State. That was one of the best games I have seen Nebraska play in a long time. It was, even against a maybe not vintage Michigan State team, but things made sense. They clicked. Nebraska shot 10 of 23 from 3 that night, 17 of 31 from 2, so 27 of 54, and even 50% overall. 16 assists on 27 made field goals. That lineup worked, and Nebraska stuck with it until guys were banged up. I don't think that Nebraska is such a good shooting team that it can afford to give up some shooting for rebounding, especially if the guy you're going to put in for rebounding pulls down 0 in 15 minutes. Yeah. Right? What Juwan Gary can do, I don't say with the ball in his hands, but he's a more competent floor spacer than Josiah Alec is. He's just as good, if not a better rebounder. I think he's got a little more athletic pop. And what that does is you make that move to move Demarcus Lawrence to the bench, who we've talked about a lot, who we know is struggling to adapt to this new role. But Strick, you said it here on this postgame, you've said it all year. The looseness that Bryce Williams plays with is not good in a point guard. That's got to be the ultimate caretaker, take care of the ball. I know Nebraska trusts Bryce Williams to run plenty of point and have the ball in his hands a lot, but I don't think he can handle that full time. In spurts, absolutely. In open court, absolutely. But to say he's the one that you're relying on to get everyone in the right spots, to make the best decisions with the ball, I don't think is fair to that young man. I don't think that is his best skill. So Nebraska sacrificed shooting for rebounding against a team that shot lights out against you the first time and has now made 10 threes in 6 straight games. Guess what the first game of that 6-game stretch was? Nebraska in Lincoln. So what you can't afford to do is give up more perimeter defense because you know these guys can get hot against you and they're in their home gym. So yes, I get it. You want more rebounding, but I think you sacrificed in all the wrong areas to try to get it. Oh, and it didn't work out because your guy got 0 rebounds anyways in the end.
Well, and I think, though, part of it, too, is as simple as it may sound. I always talk about starters and starters minutes, and Alec was a case of that tonight. Didn't play starters minutes, was technically a starter. They pretty much settled on him for the jump because Mast isn't going to win a whole lot of those battles. He doesn't rise up very well. Bryce just doesn't have the natural size. He's got the athleticism. I don't know if the jump is worth sacrificing, not getting a good jump start on the game with your best 5 out there. But maybe that's playing into it a little bit. I, like you, Strick, when Job came out there, was thinking, I mean, it seemingly couldn't be a whole lot worse. Right? But
it can't be worse.
It just be a substitution. It seemed to be just for Mast, who was in foul trouble, though. But so it gave me a spark of hope that maybe he's closer. But I think that was just foul trouble minutes there.
I don't know what to say, but what I will say is this: I'm whenever Bryce attacks, like he has no lift. A lot of it's straight up. Listen, I like him though. Like okay, let me say it like this. My coach always said this. If I'm not talking to you, that's when you should worry. If I'm talking about you, then you should know that I care, right? Because I actually think he has potential to be a pro. It's the same feeling I had with Jerron Boone. It's like, is there so much I see in him that I'm like, bro, you've got to change. You know what I mean? You've got to figure this out. And you drive to the basket and you have mismatch and you don't put strong body into the person to create the space so that you can elevate, and Boo Booey ends up blocking your shot. That's just an example. Like there's no way on. Look, I'm 6'3", and there's guys 6'6" that once I put my body into you, there's nothing you can do with me, right? Like that's what he should be. Like I'm like, bro, if you would just this if the Clark Kent would get out of you and Superman would arrive, he has so much potential. And that just laissez-faire type of game he has, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. And if you want to go to the next level, it's just not going to work because there's going to be dogs. There's going to be guys coming at you, and you could so dominate this league in such a way that Nebraska could go to a whole nother level. But it's got to change toward the end of this year, and it's got to be definitely something he comes back with. A whole, like the Pointer Sisters had a song called "I've Got a New Attitude." You got to come back with a new attitude, baby. Otherwise, it's good. They need a point guard too. Let's be honest.
The question I have for you guys is not just for Bryce Williams, who I could not agree any more with what Strick says, but like, what separates Nebraska? What is their separating skill, their separating characteristic that says we are going to be better at this? This is our ticket to success. I don't know if this team.
Good point. They don't have it. Yeah. Good point, Austin. Yo, that's deep. That they don't have it. Okay. Let's pause. Let's pause right there. Buck, you were around when you were young enough. Would you consider yourself to be understood or a person with a mindset to be able to understand kind of what you saw when we were playing?
Yeah. A little bit after you. I was more for the Tron Lou Cookie Belcher days, but the end of the day.
So you missed us.
Yeah.
That's okay. Those who are listening that were actually around, there's something that when you saw us play, there was a differentiator that you can establish with how we play. One, we were going to be physical. You knew that. Like the way if you go back and just watch the way we played against in the championship game against Oklahoma State, you can see it, that we're going to be physical. Two, we're going to run you out the freaking gym. So if you're not ready to get your track shoes on, that's a differentiator, because you knew we were going to be in the 80s, and if you weren't ready to get up there with us, you wasn't going to win. That's just how it was. So we were going to be physical and defend your butt, and we're going to run you out the gym. Those are things you can look at us and see across the board. Yes, there were times when we lost games. Yes, it just is what it is. But you knew that when we won them, you knew how we won them. Whereas with Nebraska, I can't say that every night.
And I think you can point to some certain teams with some identities, right? Purdue's identity is it's going to play through its big men. It hopes its guards knock down enough shots. You look at Wisconsin, maybe a bad example is they've lost 3 straight, but they're going to be so fundamentally sound on both ends of the floor. You have to work on defense to guard all their action. You're going to have to work on offense because they're so fundamentally sound. They're in their gaps. You think about Virginia in the pack line defense. You think about Jay Wright, Villanova, old teams that don't get rattled. You can point to.
You can even look at Creighton. Creighton has a
yeah.
You Nebraska, look at them.
Nebraska doesn't have that, right? You can think about what maybe it's supposed to be under Fred Hoiberg. And when I go back to what we thought the defining characteristic under Fred Hoiberg was going to be, I think of that, 4.5 to 5 man who can put the ball on the deck, who can stretch the floor, that can make plays for others. You see shades of it in Rink Mass, but he's a true 5. I don't think he's a 4. Josiah Alec, I don't think, has the ball skills or the shooting ability to fill that role. And Fred's teams have never really had wings like Bryce Williams or Eli Rice, right? I think that's new for him. So you can say, do they differentiate themselves with shooting? Well, they're shooting 34% from 3 on the year. That's not differentiating. They don't push the pace like Fred Hoiberg's teams used to do. They're not so ahead of the curve analytically with layups and threes because teams have caught on to that. Like Alabama is playing that way right now. There's nothing in terms of the basketball style. There's nothing in terms of the mindset of the team. And there's no one true X factor of a player that Nebraska can hang its hat on any given night, which, sometimes is, hey, you don't know who to guard, don't know who to scout the most. And there's a time and a place for that. But nights like tonight, when you need energy on the road, you need something to hang your hat on. Let's go back to this. This is our best shot. Let's come out of the gate hard. By the first media timeout, we will establish how this game is going to be played. It's been a long time since we've seen Nebraska do that this season.
Well, and I think one consistency lately is not a good one, which is open 3-point shots. I mean, Nebraska has been bailed out sometimes by teams not shooting well, but Northwestern wasn't having any of that. As you're pointing, they came into the game tonight hot. And then I'm just tired of hearing this. I mean, and this is, again, to what you go to last year. Did they have something that stood out? Yes, their defense. It was like a program shift away from kind of the Hoiberg offense into a defensive-minded team that did run their offense through Derek Walker and Sam Griesel, but the defense was consistent. Now what the defense is consistent is either giving up individual career highs or season highs or team season highs, which again tonight Northwestern did with their 47-point first half, the most of any game this season in the first half for Northwestern. I mean, but we've been hearing this over and over. Now, I don't want to get too upset and we start to bury this team. They do have, some good depth. They're, and when some of those guys play poorly, you start to question a little bit, but they've got some things going for it, and they certainly have a pretty good tournament resume still. So I know we get kind of high after wins and low on losses, but it's just frustrating because it's not just a win or a loss. Outside of that Illinois game, which they're coming off, you were hoping they would carry some of that momentum. it's Jekyll and Hyde. It's either they are hot on, tough to beat at Pinnacle Bank Arena, or getting blown out on the road.
And this is where I want to throw this to Strick, because he and I have talked about this, more times than we can count, is who's going to take control of this team? Like what Strick was saying about Bryce Williams, is there more in there? How do you tap into that? It's for the whole team, right? Just the mindset and the identity of this team can be really summed up in that one player, that there is so much on the table for this team. And that's why I think we're all so passionate and fired up about it, because it's almost like, do they know how good they can be? Do they truly understand what's on the table for them and what they can accomplish? Like, this is a good team. No one's doubting this is a good team, but it could be a really pretty darn good team that settles at that good level because of the Jekyll and Hyde stuff.
There it is. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's why I'm so critical. That's why I'm so critical, because they are so much more better than what they show. And you can just see the tale of the two halves. It's literally the opposite of what you probably saw in Minnesota, where they laid the egg in the first half, and then they all of a sudden showed life, and not the whole second half. You can't when you play on the road and you're trying to get wins, you have to at least, like, if you're going to take a break and they're going to have a run, you maybe 4 or 5 minutes, maybe. Let's just say that when you're trying to get a tough road win, now that would have been a quad 1 win for them on the road. So here's the thing: when you're doing that, you must lay it on the line. And I mean, everything has to be in order in the style and the way that you're playing. You cannot be lackadaisical like they were and think that you're going to go on the road and win, especially with those differentials and especially with those numbers. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Teams at the top tier, mid tier of the Big Ten, they're just too good, bro.
Yeah, and we better wrap it up. We got daily Nebraskan guys waiting in the wings, but another disappointing loss for Nebraska. Thankfully, they return to the friendly confines of Pinnacle Bank Arena for the next couple matchups, with Michigan on Saturday, followed by Penn State a week from Saturday. That Michigan game looked like the best chance at a win coming into tonight. Then Michigan knocks off Wisconsin. Might still be among your best chances, but very interesting. Michigan going to have some momentum going into that game, but Nebraska once again will be at home. And I know everybody, it's tough, and that included, shows you it's tough to win and on the road in the Big Ten, but it's not as tough as Nebraska makes it. I think there's maybe one team that's winless on the road this season in the Big Ten. Nebraska's next worst with just one victory on the road, and that didn't come in Big Ten play. So kind of interesting stuff. We'll continue the talk, but we do have Daily Nebraskan coming up next. I'm sure they will continue talking. We will be back with the Hoops Post Game Show on Saturday, hopefully following a Nebraska victory over Michigan. Thanks to Eric Strickland for staying up with us and talking some basketball with us. Thanks for Austin for jumping in the studio with me. I'm Jake Bachman. We'll have the Daily Nebraska guys further wrap it up and talk some more sports coming up next year on 93.7 The Ticket.